important to us as well. So again, I appreciate the job that you did. I know you made many trips up there, phone calls, all of that, as well as other city staff. Again, we seem to have come out very well on this session, so thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to item number 10 now for possible action, consideration of bill number 1853, an ordinance of the City of Boulder City amending an agreement. I don't have to read all the actual numbers and stuff, do I? Yeah, good. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Armentrout.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Brock Armentrout, your contracts real estate manager. This is a lease to extend the performance period for CenturyLink. They have communication facilities on top of Red Mountain. Their original lease was signed back in 2012, and it was, 2010. It's for a 5-year lease that had 4 5-year option periods that they could exercise. This is the exercise of the second of those 4 5-year option periods. This will take the lease through December 31st of 2024. It does have an annual escalator of 3% per year, rounded up to the nearest whole dollar. Over the next 5 years, the city expects to realize a little over $159,000 in rent. At such time then in 2024, I'm sure they'll be coming forward to exercise the third of the 4 5-year options. Staff has adjusted the performance period so that it falls on the half year. The finance department is moving with an effort to have all of our leases as they come up for renewal or new leases so that they have their anniversary dates on the half year, either December 31st or June 30th, so that as it's time to calculate their increases, it doesn't fall, say, like on November 10th, and we have to prorate, and it creates a headache for both their system and our system to come up with the proper number. By having it fall in the half year, it helps us ensure that we have proper budget forecasting as well as appropriate calculations for their increases. That said, City is recommending that we approve this option exercise.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council?
I have no questions or comments.
Mr. Harhay? Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion then.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Harhay? Councilman Harhay, are you still there? Shows the call's active. Okay. Well, with that, the vote's 3 in favor of passage, so. Okay, we'll move to item number 11. Mr. Harhay?
We have to.
Yeah, my vote was aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
That makes it 4 to nothing then.
I was about to clarify if it's 3 votes, it actually would have failed because under our charter, any land leases or sales require 4 votes. So
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you for calling back, Mr. Hardy.
All right, we'll move to item number 11 then for possible action, resolution 6962, resolution of the City of Boulder City approving a final map for Unit 2 of Boulder Hills Estates.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Michael Mays, Director of Community Development. Boulder Hills Estate subdivision is being developed by Historic Homes. The subdivision is located south of Adams Boulevard and east of Vertical Drive. You can see the exhibit highlighting the location of the development. It's proposed as a 3-phase development. The tentative map for the entire 30-acre subdivision was approved by the City Council on February 13th of 2018. The final map for Phase 1 was approved by the City Council on March 13th of 2018. Storybook Homes is now seeking approval of Phase 2. As you can see in the exhibit on the screen, that is the area in teal. It contains 11 acres and 45 lots. The final map that is for your consideration tonight is in conformance with the tentative map. And Resolution 6962 is for your consideration this evening to approve Phase 2 of the subdivision. James Cooper with Storybooks Homes is here to answer any questions as well as I.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from council?
The only question I have is regarding the park space. I have the family that lives in the area, and that was one of their questions was regarding the amount of park space that they're going to have, whether it might have amenities for children or if it was going to be more generally open. It was a curiosity, so I guess that was really my only real question regarding that.
Okay, and I could certainly have Storybook come up and respond to that directly. There are 3 parks planned for the entire subdivision, and they can talk about some of the amenities.
Perfect.
James Cooper, Storybook Homes. I'll have to get back with you on the amenities for the parks. We do have 3 park areas total. 2 of them will be with the Phase 2 development, one a little bit larger than the other. But I'll be happy to get back with you with the landscape plans and the amenities proposed for the larger park. Any other questions?
Mr. Hari, did you have any questions or comments regarding this final map for Phase 2?
No questions.
I just have one. It's more of a clarification that, and this is directed to Mr. Mays. The tentative map was approved sometime last year. That included a number of variances from our current codes. I believe those were front setbacks for approximately 75% of the homes was reduced. A couple of the lots were, because of the shape of the lot, did not meet the minimum horizontal width. And the later variance was provided for RV garages, and the streets are narrower than what was recommended within our existing code. I don't recall others. There may have been other variances. But what my question is, we're not going to be redoing any of that. Is that correct? We're not looking into that. That's been approved under that previous map.
That is correct, and that is a good summary of the variances that were granted, and they apply to the entire subdivision.
Okay. The other question is, we had talked about when the money's going to hit the account. This is Phase 2, so Storybook Homes has already purchased Phase 1. This will be the second phase, and we're still anticipating going forward with Phase 3, I guess in, 18 to 24 months, or?
I think ballpark, that's about right, 15, 18 months.
Okay. All right, that's all I have.
The only thing that I had, city to receive 638 square foot area, that was a jog line. Yes?
That's
that
true.
Didn't allow for a consistent line as a public easement.
There was an extension of the property that we're purchasing that it kind of extended into the landscape area along Adams, and it was irregularly shaped lot, and it just seemed like it should probably go back to Boulder City and be part of the landscape area. It was a big jog in the property.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
No comments for me.
I have no other comments.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed unanimously then. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll now move to item number 12 for possible action, discussion, and possible staff direction regarding the position of Historic Preservation Officer. This was an item that I had requested. Mr. Mays, you had provided some additional information on the need or purpose of this position. Is there something that you would like to present on that?
Thank you, Mayor. The Historic Preservation Planner was a new position that was budgeted for fiscal year 20. And its proposed creation was to respond to two of the strategic plan goals contained in the 2025 Boulder City Strategic Plan. One of them was under Goal D, promotion of historic preservation. Strategy 2, develop a historic preservation plan. Action item step 1, create a historic preservation cultural affairs division and hire a manager. In addition, there was a separate goal, Goal A, to achieve prudent financial stewardship. Strategy 5, supporting nonprofits and volunteer groups. And so with these goals in place, staff looked at how best we could provide that support to successfully implement those goals. There's three real areas to the purpose of this position. The first is obviously to successfully implement the important historic preservation goals that have been outlined within the strategic plan over the next several years, including the creation of a historic preservation plan specifically, and implementation of any additional responsibilities that staff would have to accomplish those goals. Secondly is to have a position that's dedicated to supporting nonprofits within the community. We've had expressed interest by nonprofits over the years regarding different city facilities, and we saw an opportunity for this individual to provide that support to the nonprofits. Third, we saw an opportunity because of the current workload with the existing city planner, who currently oversees the Historic Preservation Committee and staffs that, also provides support to Community Development Block Grant and administers those grant programs, to be able to shift those responsibilities to this position so that not only the city planner can be more efficient and effective in that individual's responsibilities, but then provide additional support to the Historic Preservation Committee through this new position. In summary, we provide information that looks at three options in response to this agenda item. The first is to continue with the hiring of the Historic Preservation Planner. The second is to look at a third party to provide those services. And the third is to maintain the status quo. From staff's perspective, it's important to have additional resources to successfully implement the city's goals as it relates to historic preservation and support of nonprofits. But also we believe that through this position and the expertise that would come with it, it would be an opportunity to provide additional resources to this effort. And certainly I can answer any questions.
I appreciate that. I had requested this item. When we initially discussed this during the development of our strategic plan, I had indicated at that time that I felt there were a number of things that the city could do which would not require a dedicated position for this. We do have a preservation committee that has been in place for a number of years now here. We do have people on that committee that are well informed about preservation efforts and what is needed. We will be getting shortly to an agreement with the State Historic Preservation Office for what's called certified local government, which would also potentially give us some additional resources available to preservation efforts. Preservation, I think, is critical for a city like Boulder City. And not only the community that we live in, that people want to live in. A survey was conducted last year The support for preservation was overwhelming by the residents that responded to that. I believe the number of responses was somewhere over 800 to that survey. I also feel that it is a driver for many of our businesses here, that it's the history of Boulder City, Hoover Dam, Lake Mead, that attract a lot of visitors here to our community. I also don't think the city's done a very good job over the years. Our historic district, the survey I believe was started in 1982 to determine the historic district. There were efforts made to develop ordinances that would achieve preservation within our zoning codes. The codes that were adopted had been watered down and never actually made the commitment that we were going to make preservation something that this city would accomplish. I think that those are all things that we can do without hiring an additional employee. There may be cases where we will need to contract with consultants for work. We know that one of the things that's most important for us at this point is to resurvey our historic district. Again, that survey was done, I believe, starting in 1982. The recommendation from the Park Service, who writes the guidelines for historic districts, had indicated that surveys should be done every 10 years to determine what the status of a district is. Again, we've not gone back to look at that historic district now for decades, and it has changed considerably. So I think one of the first things that would be done, and it would not be done by a preservation officer, these are, the surveys are normally conducted on a contract basis with companies that specialize in that type of work. That's how the first survey was done, the initial survey. That's something that I think we can accomplish without the addition of an additional person dedicated to this. I understand the need to get expertise. But again, I point to some of the resources we have that exist on our preservation committee. If it's necessary to get additional information regarding code improvements, that type of thing, again, I looked at the figures that you have. I think your figures are well over $200,000 for a consultant. That would be if we were to hire a full-time consultant for the city. I think many of these things can be contracted out for specific purposes that we need without having someone full-time serving those interests. There are no other communities right now in the state of Nevada that have a full-time preservation officer. Even Las Vegas, that I believe is up to 12 historic districts now, they've not had a full-time person. They have had a person, but my understanding was that that person, their duties were split among other responsibilities within the city of Las Vegas. They were not devoted full-time to preservation efforts. When we look at what we need to do in this community, there may be some point in the future where we say a preservation officer is necessary. I don't think we're at that point now, because I don't think we've done even the basic things that we need to do over several decades now that would still require consultants to come in and do the work that needs to be done, such as a resurvey. We may find when that survey is done that there are areas that are currently within the district that no longer meet the guidelines for including in a historic district. That's something that would be determined by that survey and not necessarily by a preservation officer. You had mentioned some things like working with the nonprofits in town. We've added additional people to our staff, and I'm wondering if we can't find some of those other people to work on things like the community development block grants, which is one of the things you mentioned. Other things that are in there that you had mentioned were working with these nonprofits. We have requests from some of them. They're looking at underused or non-used city facilities. Again, I don't feel that we need a full-time person to work that type of thing out. We've already contracted with a consultant to provide that information to the city on their recommendations for it. So some of that work has already been completed. when we look at this, I just feel that we've not made the effort within our existing resources, and for a community of 16,000 people to make a commitment that we're going to hire a full-time person when there are no other cities within the state of Nevada that currently have such a position. I believe we can do this in a much more reasonable manner for our taxpayers. I think we already have the expertise that we are not drawing in. As an example, the meeting for the Preservation Committee was canceled this month without, conferring with the members if they had things to discuss. I know from attending those meetings, they would like to discuss some of these things. The current chair of that committee seems to spend an awful lot of time on marketing efforts to create new districts rather than looking as to how we can protect our current district. Again, I just feel that with direction, we can accomplish an awful lot of this without this position. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to other members of council to get their thoughts on this, and then we can try and wrap up the item.
Would you like to start?
I have a question.
Mr. Harvey?
Yeah, the question is, are you, I thought we had settled this matter at the last council meeting by a 3-2 vote in the affirmative. And I'm just wondering, are we opening this up for reconsideration?
That's precisely my point, yes.
All right, well, one thing that I would like to add, at least from my standpoint, originally I voted in the negative for this position, but at such time as I received additional information from staff, as well as talking to Mr. Goya, which I think the individual you're talking about, I've been convinced that my vote in the negative was the wrong vote, and I would vote in the affirmative if it was to come before. And I think this also sets a bad precedent for council to revisit things that have already been settled by a vote of council.
Anything further?
No.
Others?
Okay, yeah, I will talk a little bit about. Obviously, historic preservation is of huge importance here to Boulder City. It rightfully was put on the strategic plan. It's been ignored for a long time here in Boulder City, and so it is time that we do take some action. But I am very torn on this because, on the one hand, I understand staff's desire to have somebody with the technical expertise, the technical knowledge, to help them implement some of these things. But on the other hand, I feel like we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. We don't have a historic preservation plan right now. We don't have any real policies in place to help push us forward, and so we're looking to maybe bringing this full-time position in with almost an empty playground for whatever. So I was kind of going over looking at our historic preservation as it is talked about in the strategic plan, and it has 8 goals and there are 8 strategies. The first one, develop a mission statement based on state and national standards. I don't think that we necessarily need a full-time position to come up with a mission statement, especially one based on state and national standards. I mean, there are standards for a reason. It's routine. Develop a historic preservation plan. Obviously, I think that would revolve around, having surveys done, because we do need to update and see where we're at right now. More outreach, community hall meetings, like Mayor McManus had said. There is a lot of interest. A lot of people participate in these forums that were revolving around town hall. So that could be something that maybe having a outside contractor could, much like we did with the strategic plan, could help us with that. Explore adding new historic districts. That is something that obviously time is of the essence. If we put things on the back burner, they can come up. Things could happen before we get there. But at the same time, that is something that the Historic Preservation Committee has been talking about, especially regarding the airport. It's something that could probably be included with the survey that we are going to do. Amend existing codes to achieve preservation goals, and that's pretty much that's the responsibility of the City Council, to set those policies, to amend the codes, getting that. So that's something that the City Council does, also having the Historic Preservation Committee to discuss, looking at those things. So just there in the first four things, I don't see the need necessarily for a full-time paid position. Then we get to number 5, identify financial incentives to promote historic preservation. 6, promote economic development through historic preservation. Develop educational campaigns. And then 8 is identify historic buildings to repurpose and reuse. Though that's where I start to see, the potential for needing somebody with that expertise to help kind of develop some more of those aspects that the city goes. I guess I'm just a little concerned that we've got this, we've taken out the old car out of the garage. It's, and we're just going to, throw a brick on the accelerator and hope we got the right person behind the wheel. I personally would like to see us start on some of these and making real moves so that when we do get down the line and see the need, and we've kind of put more in, set a goal more or less. We have all these strategies, but we don't really have any policies to guide them. So I would like to see us having those before we bring in a full-time paid position to cover that. When I was researching other communities that have done that, a lot of them first go to they go out and they contract to third parties, and they help them develop. And then after getting an idea of where the work actually is, what work needs to be done, then after they've done that after a couple of years and identified those things, that's when they go in and they get the historic preservation planner or historic preservation officer. A number of cities have different things. So that's where I'm at. I'm obviously curious to see hear some of the other deliberation, because once again, I get it. I understand the staff's desire to have that, and we are going to have to put our money where our mouth is eventually, because that's what it requires. But there are things that I think that we can do as a council with our current thing to start to get the ball rolling, and then once we've done that, come back and look at that.
I'd like to just add one thing, and that is, if there's a community that's got the procedure for putting things on the back burner, this one is it. And all I have to say is electric utilities. The rest of my case.
Okay, I have received that memorandum, and there were 3 options. And the option 1 was hire a historic preservation planner, and I too went and did a lot of homework on that to find out what other communities had full-time historic preservation planners, and they were large communities. They were cities of hundreds of thousands of people. They were not small communities. However, I knew that we had decided that that was something we were going to do. And then we looked at the utilization of a third-party consulting firm or a contract person to do this. And whereas the hourly rate, the annual rate for a contract employee is much higher, hiring a full-time employee is an ongoing commitment. And I know right away it seems like there's a lot of work that needs to be done by a somebody. I'm not sure whether this is a long-term commitment in terms of how many hours that person would be required to do next year and the year after that and the year after that. I look at the fact that the next issue that we're going to be talking about in terms of certified local government, that they offer technical assistance. On the flip side of that is how many hours per month does it require in order to maintain that certification. I guess I'm going with option number 2 because I think it's important to have somebody who's got that expertise right away. If we go ahead in the CLG and in terms of surveying what we have, in terms of overseeing policy development and knowing what other cities have done rather than having a full-time employee right away. I don't think it's something that should be given up on, that it piece of some right now able to do the surveys, do the CLG work, as opposed to having to bring somebody up to speed here. I think we need somebody. Again, I'm not sure that long-term employment commitment is necessarily the solution today. Like I said, I did a lot of work. I looked all over the country at the size of cities that had brought in full-time historic preservation planner. It seems like a lot of cities have done that, but again, they're large communities with multiple historic areas. So that was my 2 cents, that I felt that a outside employment contract employee or a consultant as opposed to a full-time employee.
Well, with that, I'll try and put this into some type of a motion then. At this time, the position should be put on hold, the hiring for the position. I know that posting has already been done. Applications have already been received. I believe, I'm not sure what the procedure is in this case, but to notify those people that we are looking at the position and reconsidering it. So that would be the first part of the motion, that at this time the hiring of that person be put on hold. There seems to be discussion among city staff. Okay. And the hiring of the position be put on hold at this time. The Preservation Committee be directed to produce a list of priorities over their next 2 meetings to report back to council on what they believe is most significant as far as the process that we should use. And at that time, we would be in a position to make further recommendations. Also, that city staff be requested to provide a list of priorities that they feel is necessary to move forward with producing preservation efforts here in Boulder City.
Mayor, for clarification, so you're asking, or your motion would say that the committee would work independently, provide the council their priorities, and then staff would work independently and provide their priorities?
Well, hopefully there would be some coordination there. It doesn't appear there's been a lot of coordination in the past. I think that would be an excellent way to do it, is to have city staff and the committee work together on developing those priorities. But I specifically would task the committee at their next 2 meetings to make it a priority within their agendas to come up with that list of priorities that are necessary.
I understand. So you, in your proposed motion, is that you're directing the committee to provide the council the priorities on how to move forward with the initiatives under the goal of historic preservation?
Correct.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I also am clear that this is a council city manager form of government that's part of the operations and maintenance of the city, and so now you may be potentially violating the responsibilities of the city manager and city staff in moving forward in the operations and maintenance. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear as to what you're asking to be done.
Please be specific on what your objection is.
The operations and maintenance of the city is the responsibility of the city manager and the city staff. We do work with the committees. The committees advise, but it does require the input and the assistance of city staff. This is why we're concerned that by moving forward with the committees without staff input, that's why I wanted clarification. If you wanted 2 separate priority lists, then it does appear that you're getting direction from 2 different sources. If you want us to coordinate, that's fine. I just want to make sure I understand how you want us to move forward.
Again, my reading of the charter is that these committees are formed to inform council. That is the purpose of these committees.
the committees are formed by charter authority by the council to support the council in understanding and making decisions. They do not have decision-making abilities in most cases, but they have been tasked or may be tasked by a city council to do specific things and make specific recommendations back to council. I believe that's their function as defined within the city charter.
I have a question for the city clerk.
Go ahead, Brian. Councilmember Harvey.
Yeah. In the past, how many times can you enumerate that the council has reconsidered the motion immediately after passing it in the next meeting over? Is that a commonplace thing, or is it? Because I don't remember it ever being brought up in my first period of service here.
Councilmember Harvey, to my recollection, it has not been done. That doesn't mean it cannot be done.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the answer. Could someone closer to the unit give me the answer?
I'll pass along what Madam City Clerk said. She said to her recollection it had not been done, but that did not mean that it could not be done.
Understand that. All right.
I would like to add that City Council did vote to potentially put on the ballot to sell the historic or the old hangar, and at that point in time, I believe at the next council meeting, or maybe it was one after that, the council did then vote to remove it. That was shortly after that had happened. So the City Council had voted, and then that's at least my recollection.
That's a little different than this item. This is a much more complex item. It's not just a matter of holding the position. It is a matter of amending our budget, and it is a matter of amending our strategic plan and our implementation plan.
Then I would ask an opinion from the city attorney. Do we then need to go back into the budget and delete this position?
Yes, so we don't run afoul with Section 11 of the Charter. That would be my recommendation to the council, that if you do not want to fill this position after it has already been approved by a prior council, the appropriate action would be to go back into that budget and remove this, defund this position, and remove it in its entirety instead of giving a directive to simply not fill the position.
Okay, and then if a year, 2 years down the road we decide, okay, we're now in a position, we've made a decision, we're ready to go forward with this position, or at least consideration of it, that could then be done within the constraints of whatever budget we have at that time.
Correct.
Okay, well then I will amend what I have said, the two motions. First motion would be a directive to have a resolution to remove this position from the budget.
I'll second.
Well, hang on. Let me finish. The second motion would be to direct the Preservation Committee to include on their agenda the formulation of a priority list of what they believe needs to be done to move preservation forward over the next 2-year period. And again, so as not to run afoul of the city charter, we would encourage city staff to participate in that, but that's up to the city manager to make that decision.
How would this affect our relationship with SHPO?
I'd ask.
We need a second before we can have any further discussion, please.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second for both motions?
Yeah, I'm a little confused right now. Is there, so there's a motion on the table. Is there one motion? Is there two motions?
There should only be one motion on the floor at a time, so it can be one big motion, I guess.
Well,
what's the vote on?
we're still formulating the motion, Mr. Harhay.
Actually, I take that back. Because they're different, very different, we need two separate motions, please.
Okay, then as I had said, first motion will be we will request from city staff a resolution to amend the budget to remove the position of Historic Preservation Officer at this time.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Can I?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. In the event we decided to utilize a third person, consulting firm or contract employee, how would that fit into the budget?
Currently, we don't have any funds to support that. The budget would need to be amended to accommodate that. And Mayor McManus, I guess, so that staff has better direction, I would assume that part of what you're looking for, both with the responsibilities and priorities coming out of the Historic Preservation Committee, is also an understanding of what that will cost. Because if we're going to look at third party, because again, currently with the current position, that position does not, the city planner does not have any additional capacity to support historic preservation efforts. So we'd be looking to third party to support all of these functions. We would come back and provide information on the estimate of what that would cost so we can amend the budget accordingly.
I was going to suggest that maybe we hold off on removing the position because we may want to add money to fund an independent consultant. So just shift the money.
I still think we would need to remove the position from the budget and separately. I mean, I understand Mrs. Pelletier's look from the finance side of it, but I think from the legality side of it, we would need to remove that position.
That would be cleaner, I believe, to remove that position, and then, as Mr. Mays had mentioned, that an estimate would be provided to amend the budget to add any consulting work that may be deemed necessary.
Okay.
Question, would that be done at a separate meeting, a separate time and agenda?
Well, yeah, it would. We could do it during the same meeting. We could put it on the agenda for the same meeting, right?
So that we could discuss, where we discuss amending the budget, remove the position, and then also at that same meeting discuss potentially looking towards a contractor.
Correct.
Okay. I'm much more comfortable with that.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second then to remove this position from the budget. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Carries 3-1.
I'd like to explain that. My nay vote is essentially directly related to the issue, but of course it has to be. But it's against setting a precedent where we unravel a duly adopted position of city council without the receipt of any new information. And to get back to my earlier question, there was an instance where council reversed itself, and that was in the area of the selling of the airport hangar as to whether it should be put on the ballot. And the new information was that the city manager had informed council that a inventory of all the historic buildings was underway, and it would be inappropriate for that decision to go, or that vote to go forward, or that measured. So that's the new information. And from what I'm hearing, there's no new information regarding what we discussed last council meeting.
RA, new council on here would policy. Okay, to proceed then with the second motion, the motion would be that the Preservation Committee be provided direction from City Council to develop two meetings with just that City Clerk, do you need any clarification?
Second.
Discussion?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay, we'll now move to item number 13 for possible action. 6963, a resolution approving an agreement office for certified local government designation.
By the National Service certified have access to state resources to promote 4 CL includes CLG certified. A city must enter into an agreement which outlines the city, resources, and for the city to utilize the Secretary of the Interior standards and guidelines to SHPO on historic preservation efforts. Achieving the strategic plan.
Council?
I have no question.
His action should not have any impact on this agreement with the city has a designated person for the SHPO office to contact.
Person, but they do.
And with that, I have a motion